Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Massey College for tonight's Massey Music Salon. We're in the wonderful common room today. Just a note that we have this amazing technical setup, not because it's being live streamed, but we are recording tonight's salon, so just so you're aware. Before we begin, I wish to acknowledge that Massey College is built on land that has been home to Indigenous people for thousands of years. It was the land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and it is the treaty land of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I want to acknowledge our duty of stewardship towards this land and the great privilege that we have to be able to do our work here. I'm Hannah Chan Hartley. I'm a musicologist, a Quadrangle Society member, and a member of the Massey Music Salon Planning Committee, and I'm also the host of tonight's event. So welcome to the second Massey Music Salon of the academic year. Tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome, well, it was supposed to be 2 members, but there's only 1 member with us, of the 5 members of Toronto-based ensemble Pantayo. And we have here Katrin Estacio of the group, and unfortunately Michelle Cruz, who was also supposed to join us, couldn't make it, but we have Kat. She will be in conversation with Michael Barclay, and I hear they have a pretty full presentation planned for tonight, so without further ado, I am going to introduce them. Pantayo is a group of queer Filipinx Kulintang gong punks based in Toronto. The ensemble combines traditional Kulintang music from the Philippines with contemporary influences. In addition to the Kulintang, the band also incorporates vocals, drums, synths, and other instruments into their music and performances. Their unique sound blends traditional elements with modern styles like R&B, pop, punk, and electronic music. In addition to Katrin Estacio, the members of Pantayo include Michelle Cruz, Eirene Cloma, Joanna Delos Reyes, and Katrin Estacio. Pantayo's music is not only a reflection of their cultural heritage, but also a testament to the creativity and diversity of the Canadian music landscape. And Michael Barclay is a former journalism fellow at Massey College. He is the author of 3 acclaimed books about Canadian music, including the 2018 national bestseller, The Never-Ending Present, The Story of Gord Downie and the Tragically Hip, and more recently, Hearts on Fire, 5 years that changed Canadian music, 2000 to 2005. He has worked at Maclean's Magazine and at CBC Radio's Brave New Waves, and he currently writes a weekly music newsletter called That Night in Toronto. Please welcome Kat and Michael.
How's it going?
It's chill.
I told Kat earlier I wore this shirt tonight for her, which is from Exclaim magazine, where I didn't start my writing career, but it was a very early step in mine. And many generations later, Kat is employed there as, what's your official title there?
I'm the layout editor of the print magazine.
The print magazine, ladies and gentlemen, the national...
Long live print.
Nationally distributed free print magazine, Exclaim. It births great people. And so you work in a day job where you're surrounded by a bunch of music fans. And I think it's safe to say that Pantayo doesn't really sound like anything else.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, just because, first of all, it's the brainchild of 5 individuals that happened to be in a group and then one day decided, let's be a band.
What do you mean you were in a group before a band?
Yeah. We formed in 2012 and we wanted to learn about Kulintang as a means to connect with our culture. And as, you know, as a part of diaspora that's so far away from the homeland, we met at a time in our lives when we were really yearning that connection with ourselves, with our inner selves, with our culture, with other Filipinos and Filipinas in the diaspora. And we thought that, hey, music is the most accessible way of kind of distilling all of the questions that you have in your mind. And so we thought of learning Kulintang together without the access to a teacher in Toronto in 2012. And that was, I think, a pretty gutsy move because, as you can see here in front of us, this is Kulintang. And back then, we didn't even have this. We were banging on tables and pretend instruments and access to sheet music that was transcribed by academics. So it's kind of like inceptionized in terms of like how we had access to it. So that's kind of how we formed. And then a few years later, we wanted to intentionally write something that was born out of our experiences and not heavily rely on the reproduction of some sort of folk music, because that's another avenue that people can take when they learn traditional instruments.
So the makeup of the band, are you all second generation? Your parents came here? Is that...
It's a mix of
Mix?
both. Yeah, it's a mix of both. I call myself a 1.5 generation Filipinx because I was already a teenager when I moved to Canada with my parents and my sister, Katrin, who's also in the band. But two of our members, Michelle and Joanna, they both came to Canada as really young children. And Eirene was born in Vancouver to Filipino parents also. And so it's varying connection to the migration of our peoples and our settling.
The main reason I asked that is I'm just curious how much exposure you had to it growing up. I mean, it sounds like it was very much in your minds as a concept that you wanted to actualize. Did you ever see this instrument growing up?
I did. I think I was pretty lucky that the school that I went to in the Philippines was pretty connected to learning about the cultures that are outside of the mainstream. Just to keep in mind that the Philippines was colonized by Spanish, American, and Japanese. And so access to music, when people think about Filipinos and music, it's like singing karaoke or doing covers and maybe singing on cruise ships. And so...
That's not traditional music?
It's not, unfortunately. Although I could call it tradition. But yeah, the school that I went to had a music room. I remember it was a music room that had different kinds of ethnic instruments from the north to the south part of the Philippines, and one of them is Kulintang. But me and my sister never really had a chance to pursue it or like learn about it until we moved to Canada with Pantayo. And I think a similar kind of story was true for the rest of the members of Pantayo, because we all grew up in pop music, in American pop music, a little bit of 2000s R&B, and I would say like the new metal of that time also.
So Rihanna and Korn is what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, a bunch of those influences, and layer geography on top of that. So that's kind of our collective experience, I guess.
My understanding is it's specifically Southern Filipino instrument,
Yes.
right? And is that where your school was? Is that where you...
No. So these instruments are specifically from Maguindanao, although Kulintang also is present in other cultures in the Philippines. The reason why Maguindanao is what made its way to North America, to Turtle Island, is because that's what was studied by ethnomusicologists and academics in the 70s. I don't know if you probably know this time in the 70s where, everyone from Led Zeppelin to the Beatles were playing something Eastern. and that could be from things like a sitar or using a gamelan from Indonesia. So during that time, there were also researchers that made their way to the Philippines and kind of documented Kulintang. So yeah, we wanted to mention specifically this is Maguindanao because it's everywhere. It doesn't really live only in like within the confines of a geographic boundary of a country, because this was pre-colonial. This was before the times of the Spanish. It existed when Indonesia and the Philippines and Borneo and even arguably Vietnam and Thailand were all exchanging cultures and exchanging goods and services. So it's really cool that it made its way to us, even though we are not in the Philippines anymore and we're kind of removed geographically. And so when we get the chance to talk about the instruments, we wanted to point to where it comes from, because I think if it has survived all of those years, the centuries, then I think it's a little bit of a responsibility also to mention that it has survived all of that.
So I'm back to kind of the actualization of the band as a concept before it's a band. So how did you find that teacher? How did you eventually find the instruments that you would play? How did that all click?
The good old internet. And actually hashtags. If you can believe it, hashtag Kulintang in 2013 was pretty sparse. And hashtag Magindanaoan was also pretty sparse. And so I think we were really like trying to connect. And from the convenience of our seats, we were able to email teachers. We were able to, I was able to email my music teacher when I was in school in the Philippines and asked my teacher, hey, can you forward me that sheet that you teach the students? So we had that kind of like starting point of what to play, but how to play, we ended up doing as just like put everyone in a room and kind of assign roles to each person. And I remember the first few meetings, we were still swapping instruments. So since we didn't have a Kulintang, maybe one person learned one piece, and then another person learned another piece, and then the ensemble instruments like the agong and a hand drum called the dabakan was played by other people. And so we would swap instruments, and that's when we learned how to form and play as an ensemble. And then we ended up playing at community events because they found out, oh, there's this group of Filipinos that are learning how to play Kulintang. Maybe you can show us one or two songs for an advocacy event, for example. Our first public performance was at a fundraiser, I think, for the indigenous peoples of the northern part of the Philippines, the Cordilleras. And so they had like a song and dance section to their event, and that's where we first called ourselves Pantayo. And it was out of the need to be called something as a group, as opposed to a group of Filipinos that play Kulintang that don't really know yet how to play it.
Surely there's an acronym in there somewhere.
Yeah. So that was really central to our beginning as a group, I think, because we centered our learning with each other, we centered our learning with community, and through that we were able to connect with folks that are in the San Francisco Bay Area who were also learning from a teacher there. And then also students that are learning Kulintang in the Philippines. So like I was able to also connect with the people that have learned from a teacher there. So in San Francisco, the teacher, his name was Guru Danny Kalanduyan, and he was like the teacher there. And then in the Philippines, there's so much more. But the teacher that we learned from is Guru Agamay Butokan, who happens to be Maguindanao also. And so the connection to the teachers is part of our mandate as a group, is to also connect to other folks who are playing the instrument, and to give back to the teachers, while at the same time creating our art, our music. And it was interesting when we first decided that we were going to be a band that makes music and that writes our own music. We felt the need to get the blessing from these teachers, just to make sure that we are being respectful to the culture, and thankfully they said yes. Thankfully they were like very excited, and I was really over the moon when we spoke to Guru Danny from the San Francisco Bay Area, because I think the year after we had met, he sadly passed away, but his legacy lives on. There's a lot of musicians in San Francisco, and so when we created our first album in 2020, that was like, okay, this is kind of like a taste of our voice.
I think we should hear a taste of your voice.
Sure, yeah.
We had a whole plan here that I ignored. We were going to play a video off the top. We could play that video now and then maybe demonstrate the actual instruments.
Sure, yes, let's do it.
So I just want to mention before we play this video that that 2020 debut came out on a local label, Telephone Explosion.
Yes, that's right.
Puts out a lot of great music in Toronto, and it was shortlisted for the Players Music Prize. The downside of that was it was the height of COVID, so you didn't get to play at the gala or anything else. So in lieu of the gala that year, the money they saved by not throwing a gala, they gave to each of the artists to make a video that they would broadcast during the digital gala. And I think that's what we're going to see right now, right?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
So you took that money and ran and made this
a film.
video. All right.
Hi. You got it. Let's go. They're waiting for you. Nahanap ko na si Vivi. Yan lang pala siya. Sige na.
Teka. Kasama ba natin to? Sige na nga.
Not here for the lights, baby. Represent for my sisters, yeah. Gonna take up all this space, hey. Don't take a kindness for weakness, yeah. All these basic witches, yeah. 'Cause we sure will be the witness. Be real. 'Cause we smelling all the liars here.
Ulit tayo?
No, thank you.
Yun ba yun? Galing mo, ah. Nahirapan ka siguro. Para sa'yo talaga to.
This was obviously meant for you. Have you eaten?
Yeah, kain. Mahaba pa ang laban.
Eat up. You'll have to build your strength. You have a big fight ahead of you.
Yeah, no, we're not world star, cause we are world class. Sisters gonna come from the system with a feet. War and listen to the beat of this instrument. Sound of our resistance. We won't be your enemy, but if you fuck up, here we go.
Very nice. I forgot that Casey Massey was in that video.
Yeah, and AP Eliermo also.
Oh, right.
Which we consider our elders.
The elders of the Filipino indie rock community in Toronto from
Yep.
Obiju and Hooded Fang.
Yep.
You can hear in that track there, I mean, that wasn't a continuous music video as much as it was a short film, but you can hear the non-traditional elements. There's very much an R&B background there, full rhythm section and synths and everything else. But why don't you tell us what we got here right now?
Yeah, so here in front is called a Kulintang. It's a series of 8 gongs from lowest to highest, and each set is tuned to itself. And so even if we have 2 or 3 sets with us, you can't just swap them out. It has to be played with their friends. And this is an agong. They're meant to be played in 2s, but since Michelle wasn't able to join us today, I only brought 1. And then I can demo it in the room for you.
So each one just has 2 tones primarily, or can you get different tones from that? Like,
Oh, yeah. I think just for the purposes of this instrument, it's meant to be like a more of a rhythmic instrument, so not so much different notes on it. The other gong that's partnered with this one is a little bit deeper, but again, it's meant to be played as a rhythm.
because it's
Yeah.
very like melodic though, like you can hear the tones in it, but is it more like like when you play a drum kit, you can tune each individual tom, but it won't
Totally.
interfere with the key of what anyone else is playing.
Yeah, it's the key of Kulintang. There is no key, but yeah.
So not like timpani or something.
Yeah, and then I'll play the Kulintang. I'll play a sample.
And so what scale do we have here? You've 8 notes.
Yes. It's, I think this one is close to, I'm not even going to try. It's in between notes. And then when we try to write something, we usually try to listen to it again because it can shift depending on the weather, depending on handling, depending on whether we drop it.
How often do you drop it?
Oh
Kat?
my gosh. Unfortunate, but it has happened already twice in the past month.
And this month.
Yeah, I know. I'm quite clumsy this month, but hopefully nothing more for the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got your quota in this month. So, but when you say it's between notes, are you talking about quarter tones, or what exactly is happening there?
So, if we take the example of Wag Mataranta, the music that is playing at the background is the song Taranta. When we wrote that, we came up with different rhythms and melodies on the Kulintang, and we layered it with bell chime synth sounds that are kind of tuned a little bit lower or a little bit higher than what you would find, let's say, in a piano or in a guitar. And so when I say in between, it's kind of like a few cents lower, a few cents higher.
Right.
And it's also because when you hit it, there's the resonance that you can hear from it.
Right. And you're normally playing it with these mallets? Are there other ways to play it, or it's always?
Usually with these mallets, but when I play like a solo experimental improvisational set, I would usually play with different things like a rock, or I once put the what do you call it? The motor in an aquarium, and then I put it on the underside of it, and I put water inside, so it kind of has like this drone sound.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah.
You didn't bring that tonight?
No, I'm sorry. I only had 2 hands.
Don't want to drop it.
But for the purposes of playing in a band, this is how we play it with mallets, one on each hand.
So when you're writing music, you're not really moving beyond this scale, obviously. Or are the different Kulintangs in the ensemble able to play in different keys, for example, or is your scope inherently limited there?
That's an interesting question, because when we started writing music, we were thinking, should we tune the gongs to a guitar? Mm-hmm. And then when we spoke to one of our teachers, they were like, why would you do that? And then we were like, of course, why would we do that? And so when we create music, what we now do is we base our song structures and the vibe of it first on the Kulintang, and then find what chords or progressions work on guitar and synth and drums, and not the other way around. Because I think having limitations is good. If we didn't have the gongs, we could write whatever. We could write anything on a synth. We could write anything on a sampler. That's kind of sounding like these gongs, but not necessarily like the essence of an actual physical instrument. So I thought that using Kulintang is really like a physical grounding for our music, because of the limitations. I don't even want to call it limitations. It's just like a set of rules that we happen to abide by, and that's what it is. Yeah.
And so there's 5 of you in the band. There were 7 originally, I think?
Yes. When we first started, there were 7, and then transitions happened.
So do you, among those 5, is one of you also a drummer or a bass player or the designated synth player or guitar player?
Yeah, so in our live performance, maybe we can pull up the visual. of our. Oh, this is all our members. We also teach Kulintang, and we call it Kuliversity, Kulintang University. And this is one screen of
That's
it.
an amazing graphic. It looks like a cooking show. It looks like those are all pots that you're about
They
to...
are pot gongs, so
Okay,
yes.
there you go.
But yeah, so when we teach Kulintang, we want to make it accessible. So this is a screen grab of that, and our members are, in the back are Eirene and Michelle, and then in the front is me, my sister Katrin, and Joanna, and then we have Kulintang in the front.
That's a very accessible image. I would enroll based on that image.
Yeah, so we started teaching Kulintang because there's no teacher in Toronto at least, and we wanted to make it accessible. But yeah, back to our live set. We have Katrin on Kulintang, or maybe we can go to the next image. There we go. Katrin on Kulintang, and then Michelle is on Agong, on your right there. That's the Agong. Eirene is on guitar and synth. Joanna is on the lower middle image, is playing a sarunay, which is like the practice instrument for Kulintang.
What does that mean, the practice instrument?
Practice instrument meaning it's meant to be played by children with the intention of playing an actual Kulintang set. So it's smaller and it's short plates, small plates that have knobs on them. But we incorporated it in our composition and in our live set because of the different texture that it brings. And then I play a sample pad. I like to call it as like the spirit of a gong that's put in a machine. And so I play an instrument called gandingan. It's a series of 4 hanging gongs that we sampled and put in a pad. And in our live set we have Shar. There is Shar Argoza on bass, just behind Michelle there on the right image. And then Alaska B on drums on the bottom image. So we're usually joined by a bassist and a drummer when we perform live so that we can support ourselves on the rhythm section. And then all of the gongs are in the front because we literally want the gongs to be in the front and center, not just in our composition, but also in our live performances. Yeah.
I feel like maybe we should look at the live performance now.
Sure.
That seems like a good
Yeah, let's do it.
thing to throw to.
So the videos that are coming up are from a festival in Ottawa called Peak. And it's a pretty accurate representation of our live setup. But the thing that's special about this clip that we're going to show you is we collaborated with a visual artist. Her name is Marissa Galamit, and she was the one who did the set design. And then we also collaborated with Arya Evans, who provided some movement coaching for us for this performance.
Movement coaching.
I know, so that we're not so stiff.
Nice. I have a question about performance. That looked like a pretty well put on festival.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What happens when you walk into a room and the sound tech in the room first gets an idea of what's about to happen?
That's a really good question, because when we play like a show where the sound tech doesn't know Kulintang or have not mic'd a
Which
Kulintang.
is most of them?
Yes, most of them. They'll be like, how do I mic this? How does it sound like? And then they would ask to like a sample so that they have an idea of what they're gonna hear. And then we just tell them, well, we usually mic it like this under the gongs.
But are there challenges, especially when you have the live band and you have guitar amps and you have your drum kit behind you and you're in a room? Because the traditional setup would obviously be acoustic and it's loud enough to fill a large room. So any dangers or challenges in
A lot of challenges, because a lot of live mics and a lot of feedback. One thing that we learned when we started playing as a 7-piece with a drummer and a bassist is that we need in-ear monitors, because we can't have the monitors to be in the wedges, because they would just create the feedback for the gongs, the gong mics that are in front. And then, you have the drums in the back that's also so loud. And I'm usually sandwiched between the drums and the Kulintang, so I'm like, So it's really helpful for me to also have in-ears. So, so that was definitely a well-produced, like very polished festival. But we've also played bare bones, where it's just the 5 of us, and we have a backing track that lives on my sample pad, and that is a little bit of a challenge in itself, because we have to play exactly as the backing track, and there's very little room for mistake. And so, yeah, we like playing with a live drummer because of the flexibility, and also the energy is just different.
And that first song from those excerpts was very much almost a traditional pop rock song.
Totally.
Kind of in a 70s Fleetwood Mac vibe. You have 2 records out. One of them, I think the reason it's open so many years was because it was unique and there was really nothing else melding all those things. And then the second one, song by song, it's very different. Like that song I'm talking about, the kind of 70s sounding song. And then there's one that's very open-ended and very kind of a sound piece, and more experimental. Then there's songs in between. Then there's a song that's a total R&B song. Then, how did you approach that second record? Once you made one record, that was kind of like, okay, this is how we can do this, and then where are we going to take it next?
Yeah. So
were they all like individual projects? Like, now we're going to do this kind of song, or how did that work?
Yeah, a little bit of that. A little bit of the idea that it's a collection of songs. So the first clip that we watched earlier, that was written by Eirene, who was on guitar, and she has a background in jazz and country and R&B. She's more, an R&B singer, but she wrote that song as potentially a country track, country pop, and the writing of that was kind of opposite, because it first was a guitar and vocals, and then the gongs were added on top. And in contrast to the song that came afterwards, which was Eclipse, that was from the first record, and that was actually the first song that we wrote as a collaboration between all of us. And that was like gongs first, and then the verse happens later. So what differs is that for the second album, it was more of like, what are we in the flow of writing? What's coming to us, and how do we make this group environment conducive to making sure these ideas that are flowing get to flow the way that they do? And I think having that openness makes folks able to imagine what it means to, to write a Pantayo song, because at the end of the day, it's a song with Kulintang, and we see our music as like the medium is the message, and we want to be able to open our ears first to what we can create with this setup and put it in a pop context, and then see where that goes. That's why the second album is called Ang Pagdaloy, which means the flow. And that album actually ended with an instrumental, like experimental track with sounds of water and like all the playful things.
The aquarium equipment?
Yeah. So just kind of like pushing our boundaries a little bit to see where we can take this sound and still call it our music as a group.
You talked about how you've started to teach other people how to play this music, and I'm thinking about people. A lot of artists I talk to feel like they need permission to do something. Like they're not really sure if this crazy idea they have will work until someone else opens the door. So I'm thinking about in Toronto who opened those doors for you, people you would see, local performers, or even performers from elsewhere coming through town. I know you work with Alaska B as a producer, who I first heard as the drummer in this Japanese-Canadian psychedelic metal band, Yamantaka Sonic Titan.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you see them early on? Did they plant any seeds in your head? Or if not, who else?
Yeah, actually, Alaska was pretty instrumental for us in terms of wanting to create a physical record. Because when our paths met, she was very much interested in the expression of cultural music in a Western context. And so we actually collaborated in a video game soundtrack. So Pantayo and Yamantaka Sonic Titan collaborated on a, what is it called? It's called Severed. It's a locally made video game, and that's when we kind of pushed the boundaries of, we can really take this instrument and put it in any genre. And so I think that was very enlightening to us, because we were like, oh, we can play this instrument in so many different contexts. Because up until that point, I think our idea was that we had heard of Kulintang in folk dance situations where there's Fiesta Filipina dance troupe who's been doing both dance and Kulintang performance in their work for, I think, more than 30 years. And so that's kind of one way that it's present in Canada. Another was, there's other local musicians like Alauna, and they collaborated with rapper Han Han on a few projects, and so that's kind of like put it in a context of hip hop and Kulintang, which was really cool. And then in the U.S., there's a drummer called Susie Ibarra who incorporates Kulintang with her drum setup, and played in a jazz context, which was really interesting also. There's also like electronic musicians that also play Kulintang, like Jinji from Los Angeles, and Kulintronica from San Francisco, and also in the Philippines. Like, it's really cool that we're in such a connected world, because we also get to see musicians like Tusa Montes, who's based in Manila, who collaborate with jazz musicians as well, and she plays Kulintang with them.
I forget why I wrote this down earlier, but what does Gongster's Paradise mean to you?
The Gongster's Paradise. Okay, that's funny because that is the name of a Kulintang festival based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And
Amazing name.
I know, and I think it's called that. It's because Gen X's like puns, and it was.
Yes.
That is a question.
You don't?
I do love it, but I'm just like that's a little bit on the nose. But yeah, so I think they're from a generation where that's their point of reference, and so,
Coolio.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so they wanted to create that platform for Kulintang musicians in first in Turtle Island in North America, but then it broadened its scope to musicians also in the Philippines. Last year, Joanna and I were able to participate in Gongster's Paradise. And just imagine all gong programming in one day in a church. That drove me crazy in a good way, because it's like, oh, it's so really, it's really cool to see all of the different applications of this instrument, but also it was very tiring to hear. Like my ears were just so fatigued at the end of it because it was a church, but also to be in the space of previously, we connect the church with Spanish Catholicism and colonialism in the Philippines, and these are pre-colonial, and it's kind of like a big yes, it's still surviving, and it's being played in this kind of venue. So I thought it's really when I think of Gongster's Paradise, I think it's really doing the work of making it live on, so that hopefully more Kulintang musicians will get to play it.
Very ignorant white man question. The largest diaspora places in North America, San Francisco is obviously one. I know Winnipeg is a huge one.
Totally, yeah.
And Toronto. Where else? And have you played in Winnipeg or any other large diaspora places?
No, we have not. We've played nationally in Canada, in San Francisco, in the U.S., and also I think Brooklyn. But we're kind of... We don't want to be in the U.S. because you know why.
Today I definitely know why.
Today we all know why. And also just as queer, women with brown bodies, it's really tough to navigate that in the U.S. Even in Canada, but we're pretty fortunate to be able to play in jazz festivals and folk festivals. We've played in, from St. John's to Halifax to Peterborough to
Not Winnipeg.
Not Winnipeg. We've played Calgary. That's probably, and Regina, and Vancouver, but not Winnipeg. But hopefully, we were supposed to, but scheduling didn't quite work. But that's definitely one of our, one of the cities in our wish list. Hopefully.
We're almost out of time. We did have other video excerpts to show, or should we go to questions? What do you want to do? You want to show more music? Okay, that's what the semaphore from the back means. Okay.
Cool. Should we set it up before?
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. So the next section of videos, we're going to show you music videos for our single from our current release, Ang Pagdaloy, that came out in 2023. And also a single that was part of the first release in 2020 called Heto Na.
But I'd rather hear some audience questions. Does anybody have any questions for Kat about Pantayo?
Hi. Okay. Can you hear me? That was really interesting, and thank you so much for showing the instrument. You were talking about how your band has been formed since 2012, so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how your sound has changed since then, or has it?
Yeah. Yes, it definitely changed. I'm kind of chuckling because we have an archive of like studio rehearsal recordings where we play a song in different styles. And so I think that when we think about our journey as a group, we think about all the different times we tried to play, let's say like a song called VVV They Lie. It's like an electronic pop song, but sometimes we play it in like a country twangy kind of vibe. And so I think it changes, and it's really cool for us to explore that change because we get to create whichever style excites us the most, and it doesn't have to be this prescribed thing for us. I think what changed also is how we connect with the instruments. Before we were definitely thinking about like, oh, maybe we're not gonna play something like this. But as we become more familiar with the instrument, we also kind of think of different ways to express ourselves in it. It's like one of the things that Alaska, being our producer, instilled in us was that you have to fall in love with your instrument over and over again. And that goes with any instrument that you play. And for us, I still think, I still have a lot to go in terms of learning about the gongs and falling in love again and again and again. And so I think that's also another agent of change. Anybody else?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing these pretty extraordinary types of music. And a different tangent, I'm so impressed with your visual design. Can you have a great sense of humor and costuming, and there's just theatricality everywhere. So I guess that wasn't really a question, but rather a comment. But can you talk about the visual? Who does this? The visual design for you?
Totally.
Who are you wearing?
Oh, lots. It's fun. Thank you for bringing that up because we didn't get to it earlier, but one of my talking points was to talk about our community. And the community that we've, surrounded ourselves in, consists of, director Trisha Gorilis, who directed 3 of the videos that you've seen. And she has like a very distinct visual style, and we also like working with a stylist that we've worked with, all of the music videos. Their name is Kat Kalika, and we like to foster this, this creativity baby with a group of people because that's what allows us to create in different ways, and they also have been so generous to provide their skills for us. And in building this queer community that we are so lucky to be a part of, we get to create something that's very distinct, that's very exciting and playful, because at the end of the day, we're musicians. Sometimes we're weirdos and we just, stay in our rooms. But at the same time, when it's time to perform, sometimes we perform. And I think that having the support of our queer community our Filipino queer community is really what strengthens this, this persona that you saw on the videos there. We're so blessed that we are able to, make this work. And I think part of the conversation that we continually have as a group is that, do you think that we will be able to create this kind of body of work if we were in any other place other than Toronto, other than Canada? And that's a really tough question to answer, because the place really defines, who we work with and how we're able to express ourselves. And yeah, we're just really thankful to be able to do that. And I'm glad that you noticed the visuals, because in this day and age, people are very visual. So we kind of have to work with the visual component with our music. Thanks. Anybody else?
I have a quick question. How much would this cost me?
$850 Canadian, plus how much was the shipping? I shared with another person. Shipping was around $300 because they're so heavy. But yeah.
It's shipped from the Philippines?
From the Philippines, yeah. We do have a supplier in Maguindanao who we've met at Kongster's Paradise. His name is Farid Guminola. And if anybody is interested, they would always like to take in orders for Kulintangs.
But definitely nobody offshore the Philippines is making these.
Unfortunately, I can't buy this at L&M as much as I want to.
Or rent on an installment
I know. Can we have it on a rider or a... We can't, unfortunately. Yes.
I just wondered if you could talk just a little bit about Kuliversity, how people connect with it, how it works and how people can connect with it if they want to.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mary. So Kuliversity is a platform that we are working on. It started as the name of our workshop series when we teach Kulintang. And the goal of teaching Kulintang is to learn in the way that we learned. So it's breaking down this hierarchy that you have to learn from a teacher. And so this is a snap from our workshop that we did in Yellowknife as part of Folk on the Rocks. And we like to teach in an all ages environment, and this was at their downtown park. We brought out the instruments. There was it's a really good experience because with percussion instruments, it's very foundational. It's our heartbeats are percussion, right? So, and what we learned from indigenous elders is that if you have a heartbeat, if you can walk, then you can play a percussion instrument. And so we've collected all of our experience and our curriculum that we offer in a physical environment like this, and we've kind of smushed it so that we can offer it in a digital environment. And so the hope is to get people interested and learn 3 basic song types on Kulintang, and also on the accompanying ensemble instruments. And there's already a curriculum for 1 semester that we've developed. It's live now at Kuliversity.ca or .com. I'm not sure, sorry.
Look up the hashtag.
If you look up #Kuliversity, you'll probably find us. But yeah, so the goal is to make it accessible, not just in the physical way, but also in terms of learning an instrument. Because as I said earlier, we bought this from the Philippines directly, and not everybody has the means to do that. And part of Kuliversity is creating some sort of digital version of the instruments, so that when you're on your laptop or on your smartphone, you can kind of like tap and play the gongs and be like, oh, I'm playing Kulintang. And yeah, so the hope is to kind of also have a sample pack that producers can use in making their own music. Just another way to bring the legacy of Kulintang further. That's beyond us as a group. So yeah, check it out if you get the chance. Yeah.
Yeah, can I ask about that part? What material is that part?
Oh yeah. So the mallet.
Yeah.
So this one is rubber. It's basically like a bunch of elastic bands that's wrapped onto like a wooden mallet. This was also like, it came with this gong. Mm-hmm. So traditionally, this instrument called an agong, it's made with brass or bronze, but because of climate change and also deforestation, I don't know why I'm singing that, but because of those two things, like access to raw materials has been really hard, and so the Magindanaoan people thought of using a metal alloy for this agong, and also using the trunk of a jackfruit. So this is wood, and then this is metal, like sheet metal, basically, and then this is like ultra bond super zinc. That's kind of like roofing material that they have repurposed to make an instrument, because it really sucks, because the original peoples of that use the instrument also don't have access to the raw materials to make their own instruments, and so they've had to improvise, and the mallet is part of that also. I think traditionally the mallets are made of a particular type of wood from a tree that is local in Maguindanao, but what we have here is Home Depot and like dowels and that are cut to size. But I was talking to one of my teachers, Guru Agamay Botokan, about the mallets, and she was like, that doesn't sound right. And I was like, you're right, because it's not from the tree that that they're traditionally made of.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I have another question. It's about your technique, how you use. Can I?
Yeah.
Because I noticed you hold it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it different if you hold it from? If you use it like that, not like that?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Different?
I think so. The reason why I hold it close to the boss is because playing an agong is meant to be an endurance sport. So if you can remember, there's two of these set up. In the video earlier, there's two. But if you look on YouTube, for example, if you look at a Kulintang ensemble that's played outside in Maguindanao, the agong player, they would have competitions for agong, because whoever is like the most, the fastest and the most dexterous, is that the word? But like whoever has the most power and the longest, kind of playing, that's the person that wins the competition. And if you hold it here, you have like a lot to swing, and then you're kind of like using your bicep instead of just using your wrist. Yeah, so then it's faster to do it that way. But you can hold it here. It's just harder.
Okay, and I have another question. It's the last one.
Oh, do you want to take that?
Okay, it's fine.
I need it for
Okay,
the
I'm
video.
sorry. I
Oh, yeah.
don't know that you are recording.
Yeah.
Because it seems for me it's the same. Like it's very similar. So what makes every part has like a different sound?
Can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean the 8 parts.
Yeah.
It seems like me. From my perspective, I see it the same. It's very similar.
Right.
So what makes every part has its a sound, a different
I
sound.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from my studies of Kulintang, each gong has a name. I unfortunately do not know each name for each gong, and I think we mentioned earlier. I mentioned earlier that the modes, the song types, they are rhythm based, and so when a person plays a Kulintang piece, it's meant to flow from like section 1 is like the main riff, section 2 is the ascending riff, section 3 is, this is like a generalization in Maguindanao and Kulintang. Section 3 is like a lead line, and then section 4 is like a descending riff, and then section 5 is the ending, which signals to the other ensemble musicians that you're ending the piece. And so the difference in terms of like, doing the differentiation in terms of like in a piano, it doesn't have the same purpose as like, having the intervals, but it has a purpose in the entirety of it. And I think it also makes sense to me that you look at it as a whole and not so much from like one gong to the next, is because it's meant to be played as an ensemble, as a group. And so it's when we play the gongs just by itself and maybe like a guitar, it's actually taking it out of context. So to look at one gong, so if I play like an experimental piece with just this gong, for example, it's taking out of the context of the set. So it's kind of like when you take a person out of their environment and then you just like let them float in space. So it's kind of the way that I see it, at least, is that the difference, it's not so much from one piece to the next, it's looking at it as a whole. Does that answer your question?
I think we have time for maybe one more, then we should wrap, yeah? If there is one more, Sam Little has a question from Winnipeg.
Hi, thanks. I've never seen one of these before, but it's fantastic. And the next time I'm in Winnipeg, I'm going to try and seek one out.
They probably have.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. The only question that I had, well, I have many actually, but the one that I'll ask is the sound design opportunities that you've discovered with these instruments. So obviously you said you work with a producer and you incorporate electronic instruments into your performance, and you've blended these instruments with electronic music. So have you discovered some interesting ways of manipulating the sound that comes from them, and can you talk about that?
Yeah, in our first album, actually in Heto Na, one of the music videos that we showed earlier, I remember writing that with the intention of layering the gongs and also electronic instruments. And I think the opportunities that kind of comes with thinking about a piece with this as an element to it, it broadened our perspective and also our scope, because we can look at Kulintang as a texture, not so much as an instrument that plays a series of notes. And so in our recent release, Ang Pagdaloy, the last track is called Basta, which means in Filipino it's like whatever. It's not like the Italian basta. But in that track, it's kind of like enabling play and allowing for the different textures in the gongs. So I think I remember playing this gong and kind of scratching the top like that, and kind of like playing the face instead of the boss. If you look at it from like a piano, if you compare it with a piano, it doesn't really, differ from one gong to the other, like what we were talking about earlier, but the textural component to it is really interesting because when we apply delay or like when we apply like some sort of feedback to it, then it really like gives this rich texture that's kind of hypnotic and also kind of eerie, which was actually like a really cool like quality of it, because in the short film that we showed at the top of the talk, there's like an element of horror there because of how eerie it can sound. So I think when we think about sound design in that way, it's definitely more of like a textural thing that we incorporate.
Kat, can you play us out?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I could play like a traditional-ish song. If there's anything else. Yeah, okay, cool.
Katrin Estacio, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. I think Hannah's going to take us out.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you, Michael and Kat, for this very fascinating conversation, and to Kat for sharing with us your instrument, the Kulintang, and also the music of Pantayo. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
On behalf of the Massey College Music Society, I want to thank Joe Costa for producing tonight's Salon, and hopefully we'll be able to, once this is ready to go, we can share it with everyone, because I think it would be great. And thank you for all of you, to all of you for joining us here tonight, and we hope you enjoyed this Salon. Save the date for the next one, which will take place on February 5th in the new year during Black History Month. It will feature a discussion and performance of a new work commissioned by the Canadian Art Song Project. It's called The Color of Joy by composer Maria Thompson-Corley for soprano Yonel Sills, who will actually be performing the song cycle, and she's going to be accompanied by Stephen Philcox. The song cycle sets new texts by 3 Black Canadian women writers whose families have ties to the Caribbean. And this commission arose as CASP's response to from realizing that there's very little Canadian art music that gives voice to a Black experience in Canada. So I hope you can come to that. We'll be celebrating Black composers, poets, and singers. Thank you and good night.